I was kind of hoping that a few more weeks would go by before we had to revisit this particular topic, or at least if we did have to do it straight off, it'd be like a short thing and we could do something else as like a bonus at midweek, since there really isn't anything to stop me from doing more than one of these shows in a given period anymore, other than my own timing, number of hours in a day, week, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But as it is, if I did end up doing something else this week, it's probably going to end up being more about whatever Disney announces on this same subject when they do their big investor call about the Marvel and Star Wars slates on Thursday. So yeah, hope you like panicked last-minute studio executive reactions to short-term pandemic-induced market shifts that they should have pre-gamed against months ago but didn't, and will overcorrect for instead now, and thus pay for in a series of rolling disasters for years on end, because I guess that's what we're doing for this week, apparently. So, you might remember earlier this year when we were still in the hardly anyone even knows what COVID-19 even does yet, and no one knows how long this was going to last, and the government is run by evil fucking idiots who don't believe in science period of pandemic total uncertainty. There was this big controversy about whether the big summer movies originally scheduled to be in theaters should still be there or go straight to streaming in the name of public safety, and for a hot minute it all came down to Disney's Mulan and Christopher Nolan's Tenet from Warner Brothers, and with the Mouse eventually turning their Wuxia Princess flick into a premium streaming event for Disney+, while Warner Brothers stuck to their guns on Tenet as a theater-only release despite the health risk controversy, largely promoting the decision and the release itself around an auteur vision argument championed by Nolan himself, who insisted that the theatrical IMAX presentation was key to the proper audience appreciation of his artistic intent, and that it was important to encourage audiences and also journalists and film critics, who were also denied access to the film unless they wanted to brave the theatrical venues, to come out and support the theater business financially during difficult economic times. At the time, I had this to say about that position vis-a-vis Mr. Nolan. Theatrical distribution now must be turned back on, with all the attendant risk to theater workers, cleaners, attendees that entails, in order to ensure that his particular artistic vision is received in exactly the manner he planned. And whether that's marketing or self-promotion or actual persona, it can only be described from where I sit as coming off like spectacular levels of tone-deaf, callous, egomaniacal self-involvement. I mean, how much more plainly do I have to say it? I liked Inception as much as anyone, but I'm not going to risk getting sick and dying to watch another one. And while we're on the subject, Chris, if this is purely an ego trip thing, y'all need to slow down, bro. I mean, you're good, but all the film bros declaring you the new whoever for a decade might have finally gone to your head. Reality check. You ain't fun enough to be Orson Welles, you ain't prolific enough to be Hitchcock, your craftsman bona fides aren't genuine enough to be Mann, Frankenheimer, Ridley, or Tony, and you ain't interesting enough to be Kubrick. Now, the artistic argument is obviously subjective, but whatever you think of the economic argument, didn't work out. Audiences, especially in the US, either did not feel safe returning to theaters or were not compelled to take that risk by Tenet in sufficient numbers. No other major studios, or even Warner Brothers itself, followed suit with their other blockbusters, and as a result, the theater industry saw further losses. It actually looked to many as though businesses would have been more financially secure remaining mostly locked down than spending the money to attempt a moonshot reopening just for Tenet, which ultimately didn't pay any dividends. So now the situation is worse than ever, and will probably continue getting worse without some form of industry bailout situation in the offing. Anyway, fast forward to 2 weeks ago when I told you about how Warner Brothers finally said fuck it and gave up playing chicken versus Disney Marvel and Black Widow and decided to just dump Wonder Woman 1984 as a Christmas Day and date simultaneous theatrical streaming release on HBOMAX, and explained how a lot of this move was much less about the quality of the movie, the reviews for which are actually pretty good so far, or the prospects for theater business returning, which nobody can be sure of now that we've got both a timeline for vaccinations and the government economy about to be in the hands of competent people again, than it was about Warner Brothers' parent company AT&T being unhappy with the anemic sign-up numbers for the HBO Max service, which they view as a major, if not the main, content distribution focus of all their content-generating subsidiaries, and a key part of their strategy for competing as a global multimedia superpower in the coming 5G wars, not only against Disney, Google, Amazon, and Netflix, but also potential expansion by Chinese giants like Tencent and Alibaba. In any case, people were waiting for the other shoe to drop after Wonder Woman, and it turned out to be just all the shoes, with Warner Brothers announcing over the weekend that they decided to take their entire known 2021 slate, i.e. all the stuff that was finished and either pushed ahead from 2020 or slated for the early part of the year already, and pre-schedule it to release day and date for dual theatrical and HBO Max streaming release, an unprecedented first for a major studio. And they do mean all of it, from big-scale blockbusters like Kong vs. Godzilla, The Suicide Squad, Matrix 4, and Dune, to genre fare like the next Conjuring movie and prestige fare like The Many Saints of Newark, with reaction from the industry being, let's say, mixed.
We're gonna die!
Okay, actually, not so much mixed. Basically, everyone in the industry but the people at AT&T and Warner Brothers upper management who signed off on the decision, who've had anything to say in public about this, are angry as hell about it. Other studios don't like it because they see it as a form of self-dealing. Because it's a form of self-dealing, theater companies are apoplectic because, obviously, it means that when these films come out, they'll sell that many fewer tickets. That's just kind of guaranteed. A lot of people in the entertainment press are mad about it because just having gone through most of 1 year where 95% of the releases have been streaming and studios have been able to use greater control over access to such to play favorites about who gets to see what and when for reviews and talent access, are not looking forward to this becoming the norm any further going forward, and serious film lovers in general are looking at all these aspects combined as just being a massive all-around downside for the further degradation of the medium. More theater chains closing, more independent theaters strapped for content, more consolidation of power and control in the hands of a few corporations if things do somehow survive, a further fragmentation of the audience into niche home markets outside of a handful of homogenous blockbusters, the artificial sense of more options papering over the diminishment of actual choices. And, that's pretty much where I am, folks. It's very difficult to see how this doesn't just serve to push everything in the direction of exactly that, and that's bad. So, yeah, I'm more or less on the side of this that looks at that and goes, this is bad, they shouldn't have done it. Which, as it turns out, puts me unsurprisingly but a little awkwardly, which we'll circle back to, at least in the initial perception, on the nominal same side as, well, Christopher Nolan, who has blasted this decision as a betrayal of the cinematic medium by the studio he's called home for decades, and even told The Hollywood Reporter, and I quote, "Some of our industry's biggest filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service." Which is harsh, but for a change, Mr. Inception is not simply throwing around big swinging dick buzzwords. For years now, Warner Brothers has cultivated a specific company identity within the industry as being an artist-friendly, filmmaker-focused brand among the major studios. Still a business, yeah, and still cranking out tentpoles based on licensed IP and big-name stars like everyone else, but with an office culture more receptive to the auteur mindset, the idea of the singular creative voice less married to the idea of the network TV-style collaboration machine operating over at, say, Disney. A studio that'll roll the dice on, say, an R-rated militant feminist power fantasy Batman fanfiction, R-rated incel power fantasy Batman fanfiction, nearly R-rated objectivist Batman fanfiction, whatever the hell Christopher Nolan wants to do whenever he wants to do it. $165 million for Denis Villeneuve to be the latest guy to try their luck at Dune, aka Warner Brothers is just never going to see that money again. All sarcasm aside, they also have Ava DuVernay still set up to do New Gods. They were the bold studio that filmmakers who cared about their work as more than just the latest installment in the episodic product line could count on to back them up about that. And in Nolan's view, this represents a break from that. And whatever you think about his tendency to be pretentious about stuff, because he's pretentious about stuff, he's not alone on this one, and it's not just about fluffy, esoteric, highfalutin, artsy idealism. It's also about the business side, aka fucking around with people's money. Movies have multiple producers, investors, and production companies, i.e. groups of investors and investment firms incorporated collectively, that's what all the logos before the credits are about, involved in the funding and distribution of the end product. That's not necessarily counting the various back and front end deals secured with actors, directors, writers, etc., who serve as producers themselves in order to get this or that property to screen. How much each individual entity stands to actually make is generally pre-negotiated based on different tiers of release: theatrical, domestic, international, home video, broadcast, streaming, all separate, and all generally based on conventional calculus of which is getting a priority. With that upended, a lot of people's contracts potentially suddenly kinda suck depending on which points you took on what. And unlike Wonder Woman 1984, where Warner execs reportedly made sure to individually negotiate special deals to make sure talent like Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins still got nice, comfy, please continue to work with us on future sequels and other projects landings when the big changeover was made, this whole okay now everything else decision caught everyone involved in the actual movies off guard. Nobody knew it was happening, was given any say or input on the matter, nothing. Not even the other properties where Warner Brothers was only distributing a production that another studio produced and did most of the work on via cost-sharing arrangement, as was the case with Legendary Pictures on Kong vs. Godzilla and Dune. And sure enough, as of my writing this script for Monday night, Legendary's reply to Warner Brothers has been, "We think we're getting screwed on that, we'll see you in court." And frankly, I hope they follow through on this, and I hope they kick the shit out of them over it. And not only because I think it's kind of symbolically bullshit that this same studio months ago was telling everyone they should risk it all when things were much more immediately perilous over Nolan's mumbly dialogue backwards spy movie, but now when it comes to a property that's literally designed to be ideally seen in large scale possible, because, the two stars of the film are the size of fucking buildings, now they're okay dumping it onto streaming? Screw that. But also because, yeah, from where I'm standing, it really does look more like the assessment that this is the parent company telling one subsidiary to bleed itself itself out in order to boost up another part of the machinery and using the pandemic as cover for doing it all at once instead of taking it case by case, when the fact is we don't know what the situation is going to look like 6, 4, or even just 2 months from now, or maybe less. And if you want to say I'm a hypocrite because I'm agreeing with Christopher Nolan's position now when I was so very against it before and still think he was being a pretentious douche before, well, I mean, you're probably going to do that no matter what I say, but go right ahead. Regardless, you'd be wrong. His position was always about artistic integrity with little to no concern for the situational risk. He wanted theaters open and people seeing Tenet back in the middle of some of the worst, most uncertain months of the plague during the most chaotic months of the Trump administration's criminal rampage through the U.S. government, at the point when it still seemed plausible that said rampage, and thus the pandemic that it both unleashed and exacerbated through sheer malicious negligence, could be extended for who knows how many years. That was a dangerous and irresponsible prospect. But now, in my opinion, as it stands right now, we're in a different place, potentially a much different place, and it's becoming more of a different place by the day. We have incoming vaccines from multiple sources. We're about to have an entirely different government in the US, which in some respects is an even greater factor. There's no telling how much worse the pandemic was made by our system's pre-existing Trump infection, so it's entirely possible that intelligence returning to the management of American government and a veneer of sanity and civilization returning to American daily life, at least parts of this country, you could see the virus controlled and people able to live again sooner than people imagine. And that could indeed mean more regular release windows for theatrical movie schedules again, maybe not for everything on the Warner Brothers slate, certainly, but for some of it, except now nothing will even get the chance. Not the movies, not the people who made them, not the movie theaters. The owners of which are now basically left hoping against hope that when its big investor call hits on Thursday, the Disney company sticks to its guns, i.e. Black Widow, staying exclusive to theaters since we've already got plenty of stuff to stream on Plus. But even then, that would just mean they're further into a situation where one studio holds all the cards and gets to make all the rules about what's going to be in theaters and when. That's not good either. And look, maybe you don't care. Maybe you disagree with me completely, and of course it should go without saying that all of this is still very small potatoes next to the fact that there is still a plague, and what's really important is getting the vaccines out, getting people well, etc. But as far as this whole business goes, that's where things stand, and, that's my opinion on it. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.